do just a real quick brief comments, and then I'd like to talk to you, once everybody's done, I'd like to talk a little bit about, for those of you that are visiting for the first time, I'd like to talk a little bit about the inspiration of the center here, so that you have an idea of kind of who my dad was and those things that were important to him. But with that said, I'd like to invite Arturo Rodriguez to come up and say a couple of words.
Okay.
Yeah. And then,
I'll just keep it very brief. Welcome again for all of you. I know it's a long journey to come from San Jose in a bus. And when I heard you were leaving at 7 o'clock and going to be here by 11, I thought, okay. We're glad you made it. It was raining and cloudy yesterday and foggy and everything else, but with y'all coming, you made it sunny and bright, and so you changed the whole weather kind of around here. But as Paul said, I mean, this is a very special place for all of us. I mean, this is our center. This is where we come to not only to do our work and to focus and concentrate, but just as importantly to share with one another and kind of rejuice ourselves when we come here and surrounded by the atmosphere and all the environment that Caesar and the other founders, when they located this place, really brought us here and gave us a place where we could really recharge our batteries, as you might say, when we come out here. And it's very, at the same time, it has a lot of spiritual qualities to us. But there's a lot of work that continues to go and emanate from here, from our offices, but with all throughout the movement, I guess we're all over the country now in various places, but La Paz is special for us. So we're really glad that you took the time to come and be here to learn about it, and hopefully you'll go back and invite a lot of other people to come and be a part of this as well, be a part of this experience. So thank you, Supervisor, for putting together. This all started when we had a chance to go to a meeting with Victor. And Victor, this was several months ago, I forget exactly when, but in San Jose. And at that particular time, Victor says, gosh, we really want to come and visit La Paz and so forth. And Supervisor David Cortese right away just said, I'll put in the buses. I'll take care of that particular part. So we very much thank you for that, Supervisor.
Yeah, right on.
want to say a couple words? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to ask Rudy Chavez Medina to come up and stand here with me, and maybe in just a moment I want to ask him just to say a couple of things. He and his family head up the Chavez family vision and foundation up in San Jose. So for many of us in San Jose, although Arturo comes up frequently, he puts more miles on his car than anybody I've ever met in my life. And Maul comes up really honestly, more than I would actually expect, as busy as he is. You know, we have Rudy day in and day out, and he was just saying a few comments on our bus that I thought were really appropriate relative to the times and the climate that we're experiencing right now, and why it's so important to revisit not just the site and the location, but the very principles that Cesar Chavez stood for. And I had the opportunity to come down here at the urging of the late Deacon Sal Alvarez and the late Catholic Monsignor Gene Boyle. Both of them died in just the last couple of years. Sadly, we miss them greatly. They really urged the mayor of San Jose at the time, Chuck Reed, and I was a vice mayor at the time, to put together a bus trip like this and come down here. And at that time it was the anniversary of Caesar's death, and we actually had a Catholic Mass right here in this location. And I think everybody who was here present felt moved, not just in a historical way or historical context, but somehow spiritually as well. And I was eager to get here today to see if that was just always how it is here for me, and it is. And immediately when I stepped up here, I could feel that same sense. And I was fortunate enough to be here when President Obama dedicated the National Monument, and I got to sit with some family members just a few feet from where the President was speaking. What a privilege that I realized that this was sacred ground long before the President of the United States came here, and long before it became a national monument in the eyes of the United States of America. So I hope everyone gets that feeling. Maybe not everyone will, maybe some won't, but it's here if you're open to it. I think you will feel the legacy and the history in a much deeper way than any of us can really communicate with words. But we're going to try a little bit more anyway, right, Rudy? Why don't you please represent the San Jose part of the family here, and thank you so much for coming down.
No, thank you, Dave, for organizing. Thank you, Victor, Raza Roundtable. Also, there's also several other people that helped put this together. And in your program, LULAC, you'll see those folks in the back of the program, and we should thank them all. So just give them a big applause. Give me a show of hands of anybody that it's their first time to visit the National Monument, Chavez Center. And look around you. That's a lot of first timers. Okay, and I told everybody on our bus, I told the rest of you, this is historical for you. And it's historical for us, because it's the first time you're going to be here. But the good thing is it's not going to be the last time. And as Dave said, bring other people with you to join that spirit, to feel those things that Caesar believed in nonviolence, in volunteerism, in public action, and those are the things that continue to move this movement forward. They push, they strive, and we still all have it from the very early days when we were little kids. Paul's been in this all his life. Arturo's been in it most of his life, and so have I. So now it's your chance to share a part of that, and to also believe in those three strong principles. Especially in today's environment, and this is really for you adults. We're facing a political, presidential administration that is trying to cause us a lot of disruption and take away the things that we work so hard for. Not only in this movement, but in the social justice movement, in every movement, the women's movement, the gay, lesbian, and transvestite movement. And they're just trying to tear us down. We have to continue to use volunteerism, public action, and nonviolence to move forward all those things that we spent so many years building. So, I just want to say that I'm so proud of all you first timers. It's just great. And I'm also proud of all you adults that brought children. Because now the children are going to continue that legacy. Now they have something to build upon. They've already had things to build upon. Now they have a little bit more. It is such a joy to be here with you. So thank you very much for joining us. Now I'm going to put Paul on the spot, just because he's got a great story that we want to share. And that is, how did we ever buy La Paz?
That's a good place to start. But before I go any further, I want to recognize my cousin Rachel, that's also here from San Jose.
There's Rachel. Okay.
And her grandchildren, Giselle and Simon.
Future generation.
And I do want to indicate, Rudy started down that path. Michelle Osorio is here, my former chief of staff, representing LULAC, and really did a lot to help organize the trip.
Very good.
I know Victor Torres has been mentioned a couple times, but he can't be overstated how much effort he put in to help us with this trip and the planning. And then we have another very important elected official here who's doing tremendous work already. As I understand it, just adopted massive new renter protections in the city of San Jose.
Yeah, right on, Sergio, right on.
It's been coming a long time. That is truly work that's in the spirit, if it's okay for me to say it, of the movement in the United Farm Workers to protect people who are vulnerable to losing their homes. Thank you so much for that. I'm not sure who I missed, but I do have my staff members here, Janice Rombeck. Most of you on the bus met them, and Mario Lopez, and a whole bunch of people back at the county who stayed back, who put a lot of effort into this. So I always try to remember to acknowledge them as well. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Paul, to tell us how this happened.
Well, in 1962, my dad left probably the best paying job that he ever had, working with the Community Services Organization. There was a chapter in San Jose, and he went up and down the state organizing. And when he left that job, he made a decision to give up the best paying job, the most economic security he ever had, for him and my mom to return to work in the fields. They knew that they were going to give up a lot of those comforts, and they were going to have to be concerned about where the next meal was going to come from their children. But they grew up as migrant farm workers, and they always had this feeling that somebody needed to do something. And I guess after my dad saying that for about 10 years, my mother put him on the spot, and she said, well, why don't you do something about it? So they ended up in Delano in '62, and they began the work of organizing. They had this idea that they were going to organize for a long time and build a membership, and then once they had a big, strong membership and a treasury, then they would take on the growers with strikes and things like that. Well, what happened was that Filipino workers under the leadership of Larry Leong and AWOC went out on strike in September of 1965. And at that point, the National Farm Workers Association, the organization that my dad and Dolores and my Theo Richard were all part of, formed, had to make a decision. Were they going to support the strike or not? And so they abandoned their plans to build this institution before they started striking, and they joined their Filipino brothers on strike. And what ensued was a 5-year struggle to really establish the first enduring union for farm workers in the history of this country. And so during that time, many things happened, and there, we have a photo exhibit up in the visitor center that documents that grape strike, the grape strike, and some of the boycotts and different activities. But what had happened was that by the time that the Delano grape growers signed their contracts, there was workers from all over the state asking for representation, and they were organizing, and so there was big demands on the union to expand beyond Delano. Now, my father was concerned that if the headquarters stayed in Delano, that it may not pay enough attention to workers up in the Salinas Valley or down in the Imperial Valley or Oxnard or Napa or the different agricultural regions. And so he was looking for a place that was more centrally located, some place that would be out of the daily fray of Delano, but some place that wasn't so far away from the fields. But another thing that he was looking for was he was looking for a place that he could train farm workers to run their own union. You see, when my father began organizing farm workers in 1962, he had this belief that farm workers could run their own organization. He believed that given the proper training and the proper environment, that farm workers could set up and they could run their union, and they could negotiate their contracts, and they could administer, they could adjust grievances and all those things that you got to do to run an organization. But he knew that he needed a facility that he could train people in. And so he was looking for a place that was removed, the place that he could train folks. And also for him, I think he was looking for a personal refuge. Every time he left Love, every time he was on the road, he was always in conflict, strikes and boycotts and getting arrested, and it was a life of struggle. And so he was looking for a place that he could come and pull himself out of the fray and meditate in the morning and prepare himself for the next battle. And so they began to look for a place, and this facility came up. It was an old, wasn't abandoned, but it was an old county hospital sanitarium, TB sanitarium, that had been put out of service a couple of years earlier. And so the county of Kern was taking bids, and they were going to sell it to whoever would acquire it. And so my dad knew this place because my mother, as a little girl, was here. I had 2 aunts that were interned here. So it was a place that a lot of Latinos in the Central Valley knew about it, and he thought that it'd be a great location. And so there was a producer, a Hollywood producer, that had come and had offered assistance, but he said he wanted to do something that would have a lasting impact. That he just didn't want to give money that was spent and it would be over. And so he says, when you find something, let me know what it is. And so so when this project came up, they gave him a call. His name was Ed Lewis. He was the producer of that movie Spartacus and some of those big blockbusters in the 60s and 70s, right? And so they hit him up, and he said, sure. And so he came in and with the idea of acquiring this place for us. And so, I've heard different stories about the political intrigue, but what had happened was that there was an insider deal. The Board of Supervisors in Kern County were going to sell it. There were some growers that were going to buy it and turn it into a resort. And as it turns out, what I've heard is that there was this little bird, this little canary in the county clerk's office that let Mr. Lewis know what their bid was going to be. and he upped it by $5,000, and so we acquired this place for $183,000, 200 acres back in 1969, I guess it was. So that's how we ended up here. But you know, during that time, it really did become that place. It was a place that many farm workers came from up and down the state to receive training, and then they were sent back out to organize in their communities. It was a place that meant a lot to my father, because this is where he was really able to recharge those moral batteries, as Artie was talking about. And so, you know, when I fast forward now to when he passed away, he actually lived and worked here for the last 25 years of his life. More years were spent in La Paz. You know, in Delano, he was there from 1962 to 1969, 7 years. He was here 25 years. And so most of the planning and a lot of the growth of the union happened during the years here in La Paz. And so when my father passed away, and it's actually 24 years ago this Sunday that my father passed away, my mother came to us and she said, your father's wish was to be buried in La Paz, but I'm not going to do it unless you promise me that we'll never leave this place, because I'm not going to leave him alone. And so we said, well, of course we'll never leave this place. And so, you know, so we buried him here. There was a little small rose garden where the grave is at, where he wanted to be buried. And it was probably the worst place to be buried, because it was a skinny little rose garden, and traffic would come by this way and traffic would be coming by this way. And if we were like, there'd be groups like we have today, would be talking, and cattle trucks would go by us, and people were looking at us like, you know, can't we do a little bit better on the memorial? But you know, and my mom used to joke all the time. She said that my dad wanted to be buried here in the entrance because he wanted to see who was coming to work late and leaving early. but anyway, so after we buried him, we sat down and we began to take a look at the facilities, and we knew that we had to make sure that La Paz had a reason for existing for the next 50 years. And so we knew that, you know, and after he passed away, we began to receive visitors from all over the country, coming to pay their respects, bringing their kids, like doing little mandas, and so we knew that there was an opportunity here to not only commemorate his life, but to reacquaint people with the work that he dedicated his life to. So we sat down and we worked on the master plan, and part of the master plan was to develop a day use facility that people could come and spend a couple of hours, like what you're going to be doing today, pay their respects, learn a little bit about the work, and hopefully leave here feeling rejuvenated, recharged, to go back out and make differences in their communities. And then the second part of the plan was to develop a conference and meeting center, a place that people could come in and receive that kind of training, so they can go back and improve their own communities. And we're not just talking about farm worker communities, we're talking about poor people in communities throughout the country, urban and rural and suburban communities, not just Latinos, but African Americans and poor working families. And so we that was the second part of the facility. I think we're going to be having lunch out at Villa La Paz once we're done with the tour here, which is the second part. And then the third part is to develop a cultural center here with archives, and that'll be the third phase that we'll be starting pretty soon. But when it came to the first component, the visitor center, we sat down with the landscape architect, and we told him that, you know, that it was important that people get a sense of who my father was through the design and the materials being used. And so when we sat down, we gave him some filters. We said some guidelines. We said, first of all, it should have the feeling of the old California missions, right? It was an important part of my father's life. I mean, when him and my mother got married, their honeymoon was to visit the California missions. I remember as kids growing up, every time there was a big decision to make, he'd get the board and they'd go to one of the missions, San Antonio or San Miguel or different ones, and they would hold their retreats there because they could do their planning, but also give them a place to go and do a little bit of praying and meditating to make sure that, you know, that right decisions were being made. So we said that there had to be an architectural element that would speak to that part of his heritage and the heritage of many of us. And so we said it's got to have the feel of the old California missions in design and even planting. We said we also want to use materials that are of the earth. We don't want anything fancy or shiny. We don't want any polished marble or none of that stuff. We want things of the earth. We want concrete, and we want vigas, but that are worn, the beams, and even with that, we said that when the walls are finished, we don't want skinny little walls. We want thick walls, and they don't need to be finished real nice. They gotta be rustic. But more importantly, when you look at them, they gotta give you the sense of permanence. That it's been here a long time, and that it will continue to be here a long time. And actually, that's one of the messages that resonates the most right now with people coming and visiting. You know, we're going through some difficult times on a national level, right? With the leadership that's occupying the White House. And you know, many times people can become demoralized and discouraged. But you know, we go back and we remember the lessons that my father always talked about. You know, he would remind us that la causa, the fight for justice, isn't a political campaign that on a certain day whoever has the most votes wins. He said that it's surely not a baseball game, right? That after 9 innings, whoever has most runs wins. He says in our work, in the work of la causa, you only lose when you give up. You only lose when you quit. And so when you think about fixtures like these big vigas that have been here for over 100 years, and you got a feeling that they're going to be here for another 100 years, it gives you this understanding that, you know, that we're not going any place, that history is on our side. And so those are some of the things that we wanted to convey as we did our work. And so we tell them that. And then the other thing that we said was, we wanted a place that would lend itself to celebrations. My father loved a good party. If you weren't married, he'd try to marry you with somebody that was also, because he loved las bodas and the receptions, right? So the way we designed it, we have the different elevations here, and many times this higher elevation is used as an altar, or it's used as a stage for musical acts or presentations and all. And so the idea was that we don't want a place that people come in and that they leave heartbroken. We want them to come in and feel rejuvenated, to rejoice in his life and work, and be inspired to go out and to continue the work. So those were some of the guidelines that we came up with. And so if you take a look around, you know, I mentioned the vigas here. These are old growth redwoods that were cut over 125 years ago. We found them in Northern California. They were part of an old railroad trestle that we bought the lumber, we brought it in, we remilled it so we could use it for the vigas here. You know, on the plantings, grapes are synonymous with my dad and the struggle. And so we have some grapevines in the corner, but we thought we'd put some wisteria in here because when they flower like they're flowering right now, parecen uvas, they look like grapes coming from a vine, right? So it talks about the beginning of that work. You know, some of the other things that we have is that if you take a look, if we can take a step up, on each side of the memorial garden, we have a statue. On the right, we have La Virgen de Guadalupe, the patron saint that's provided a lot of hope and inspiration for our community. But also on the right-hand side, we have a statue of Saint Francis of Assisi, who was my father's favorite saint, his patron saint. And I think that he looked at his life where he gave up a life of materialism, of material wealth, to go and be of service to the poor, and he preached nonviolence and really being of service to those most in need of help. And so we have the statues of La Virgen de Guadalupe and Saint Francis of Assisi. On each side of the gravestones, or the tombs, I should say, we have a couple of rose gardens, and I guess they're just getting ready to pop. There's a red rose over here. That's the Cesar Chavez rose. After my dad passed away, the workers at the largest rose company in the country organized a union. There's been many attempts to organize over the years, and the year after he passed away, the workers got together and they organized, and one of the demands that workers had was that they would develop a Cesar Chavez rose that would commemorate his life and work. And so one of the cool things is that my mother got to pick what this rose was going to be, the petal count and the color and how fragrant it was and stuff like that. So of course, being the Mexican that she was, it had to be red. So seriously, it's a beautiful garden. And so you can see the roses are getting ready to pop, but we have a lot of buds, but they're getting ready to pop. But we have the Cesar Chavez rose on each side of his grave. And then, let's take a step up. We'll go to the grave site. Pop it from over there.
Let's have to stay together, huh?
Huh? What? No, you're just playing. You got insight.
So, when we designed the facility, we designed it for a two-person cemetery. You know, we figured that my mother should be buried with my father when her time came. And actually, my mother passed away last June. A little bit less than a year ago, she passed away. But when it was time to develop the burial the plot, you know, one thought was it had to be the old cruz de madera, the old wooden cross, right? That rustic cross. And so he actually had that cross in his office for many years. And we took it out of his office and we used it at the gravesite. But when it came time for the headstone, you know, we were kind of going back and forth. We were getting a lot of suggestions about epitaphs. Some that were pretty profound, others that were kind of clever. And we thought long and hard about it, but the more we thought about it, we thought that really wasn't my dad. You know, he was really soft-spoken, underspoken, if anything. He was a man that led by example. And so what we did was we went back to Yuma, and we visited the old Chavez cemetery. And it's, you know, it's like, it really is like an old Western cemetery. It's in the middle of Yuma. There is no grass. They have these old headstones, and they have piles of rocks. I guess they keep the coyotes from, you know, from digging things up. And so we went there, and we saw a lot of the old Chavez headstones, and they were rustic. Weren't anything fancy, and they were actually pretty plain. The person's name, the year they were born, and the year they passed away. Not even the day they were born, just the year. And so we thought that understatement was probably the best way to move ahead with this headstone. We also decided that we didn't want anything that was polished, because remember, it can't give you the idea that it's ostentatious or slick. It had to be of the earth, and so we went and we found some unfinished headstones that have the beveled edge on it, and you get this idea that somebody was out there with a chisel and hammer, right? That's a tribute to the working man and woman in this country. And so we went out and we used the unfinished the headstones, and we actually when we did my dad's, we actually did my mother's as well, and then we just finished it up last year. So that is a matching set, but one, you know, it was born with time, but this was the idea of to have an understatement. Now, another thing that we did was, you know, I talked about my father loving those missions. You know, I can remember traveling with him up and down the state, and wherever there was a fountain, he would pull over. Harris Ranch, right? I can remember, you know, like being late for meetings. Oh, we got 5 minutes, and he'd pull over and he'd sit there, and he would be refreshed by the sound of water and splashing himself on a hot summer day, and then he'd continue to San Jose or wherever he was headed to. And so we said, well, you know, we have an opportunity to do something with the fountain. Water is peaceful, but also water represents life. And so when we actually redesigned the facility, where the fountain's at here, that's where one lane of traffic went, and then where you're standing, that's where another lane of traffic was. When we moved the road over, we put up the wall to give some privacy. We had the opportunity now to tell a story with the wall fountain. And so we thought long and hard, and we said, well, what would be a good image? And the more we thought about it, we said, well, it's got to be a pilgrimage, a march. It really speaks about sacrifice and not giving up, and it's all those kind of things that test your resilience, right? And so we worked with an artist, and we came up with some images. But what we talked about, and some of the things I like to point out, is that at the front we have a farm worker carrying the Virgen of Guadalupe, which was, if you look at a lot of the old historical figures, the Virgen of Guadalupe was always in front of of the marches. Whenever there was a big convention, we'd start it off with the mass, and then we would get down to business. And so our faith played a central part of central role in our work in the movement. And then behind them, there's a young boy carrying books, and it talks about the importance of youth and education for our youth. And then there's a dog that's right next to him, and actually, the dog's kind of an inside story. My dad, when he was during the early '60s, it was a real turbulent time, and there was contracts out in his life. The FBI came up a couple of times, and he had to go. Basically, he had to be on the road nonstop, not sleeping in the same bed 2 nights in a row because they were hitting him out to get him. And so one of the things that they did was they went out and they got some German shepherds and they trained them in security work in Germany to detect bombs, and they could sense that people were going to do harm, and they were trained in security work. And so the dogs went with him every place. He had 2 of them that were his favorites, and when he was trying to figure out what he's going to call them, he says, well, I'm going to name, they're for protection, right? So I'm going to name them the best protection that farm workers have. So one was called Boycott, and the other one was Huelga, strike and boycott. So anyway, so those are 2 dogs, so that's one of the dogs. And then you have the farm worker that's carrying the U.S. flag, and then there's the mother with the baby with the also carrying the UFW flag, and there's the abuelita with her nephew, or the sobrino and nieto, with the Mexican flag, and you see the father with the baby on his shoulders, and the big sister pushing the little sister in the stroller, right? All the images of the work, because our work was done by everybody, men and women and children and los abuelos, and you go on and you see the Franciscan that talks about the role of the religious community. And then behind them, there's other farm workers, there's indigenous workers, and then behind the indigenous worker, there's a gentleman with a tie that talks about the support of the middle class consuming public. And then you got La Abuelita in the wheelchair, right? That were always played an important part of our work. And then at the end, you have the student activists, the machista, the activists that did a lot of work on campuses. And so this is our tribute to all of the people that have played important roles in the work of the movement. Because it would be a shame to think that my father did all this by himself. Actually, he was always uncomfortable with a lot of the personal praise that we see, because he knew that there was tons of people that had made big and important sacrifices because these names are lost to history. So this is our tribute to all of those folks. Now, one of the things that we did want to do here, though, is that we have 5 martyrs in our movement, 5 people that have given their life. And in poetry, water speaks of life. It represents life. And when the martyrs died, my father in their eulogy referenced the life that they gave to the movement by giving their own lives. And so we have 5 martyrs, and we have 5 streams of water, 5